In the line of duty, cops have seen some things that most people can't imagine. They've responded to countless calls that range from the mundane to the deadly. But every once in a while, there are certain calls that really stand out. In today's video, we will be looking at one such incident that will leave you speechless. So make sure to watch the video till the end. On an ordinary day in Cincinnati, Ohio, 2 cops were dispatched to a house after receiving a peculiar 911 call. The caller had reported hearing a disturbance coming from inside a residence. The caller had stated that someone was inside the house yelling and making a lot of noise. As soon as the cops arrived, they noticed that the front door of the house was wide open. This was untypical because the neighborhood was known to be quiet, and the residents usually kept their doors locked. One of the officers knocked on the door to see if anyone was home, but no one answered. The officer then decided to step into the house. He slowly made his way through the living room and noticed a pair of feet under the dining room table. He couldn't make out the face, so he cautiously approached and shone his flashlight under the table. What he saw next made him gasp. The officer had stumbled upon a gruesome sight. A guy was sprawled on the floor, stabbed multiple times. The man's eyes were wide open in a silent scream, and blood was splattered everywhere. The officer immediately called for backup as he tried to process what had happened here. As the other officers arrived, they began to investigate the crime scene. They found blood all over the house and the walls, which indicated that the man had been dragged across the floor. They also discovered several weapons, including a meat cleaver and a knife, which were covered in blood. The police were baffled by the brutality of the crime. It was clear that the attacker had meant to do harm. But what could have caused such a horrific crime? And who was responsible? The police needed to find out quickly because they knew that whoever had done this was a threat to society and needed to be brought to justice. The clock was ticking and the pressure was on. The police were determined to find the killer before they struck again. The investigation was underway and the race against time had begun. After examining the body, the coroner estimated the time of death to be around 11 p.m. the previous night. This was significant because it provided a window of time for the killer to be caught. Investigators combed through the evidence, hoping for a breakthrough. The victim was identified as 42-year-old James White. He was a local resident with no known enemies. This made no sense to the police. Why would someone want to hurt him? As the investigation continued, the police received an anonymous tip that led them to a nearby motel. Could this be the break they were waiting for? Let's find out. Upon arriving at the motel, the police searched the rooms and questioned the staff. And sure enough, they found one of James's credit cards in the trash can of one of the rooms. They immediately searched the room where they found James's backpack. Inside the bag, they found a pair of bloody shoes, a bloody meat cleaver, and a bloody knife, further confirming that this was the murder weapon. The police had found enough evidence to charge the individual who had committed the crime. The arrest was made, and the individual was brought into the station. They had a mountain of evidence against them, including security footage from the motel and eyewitness accounts from people who had seen them at the crime scene. However, when the police went to question the individual, they refused to cooperate. They remained silent, which only made the police more suspicious of their client. The police were determined to get answers, so they continued to question the suspect, hoping that eventually something would break. But as the hours passed, the suspect remained tight-lipped. While the investigation was still ongoing, the police released the images of the suspect to the public in an attempt to identify them. As days turned into weeks, the police grew increasingly frustrated, as the case seemed to hit a dead end. There were no new leads, and the suspect had refused to speak a word. Just when the police were about to give up hope, a woman came forward claiming to be the sister of the prime suspect. She had seen the police sketch of her brother and knew immediately that he was involved in the crime. She contacted the police and agreed to set up a trap. She told the police that she would lure her brother to a secluded spot where the police would be waiting to arrest him. The police were skeptical, but desperate for a lead, they agreed to the plan. The operation was risky, but the potential reward was too great to pass up. If this was the key to finally catching the killer, then so be it. The police waited patiently, hoping that the suspect would take the bait. After what felt like an eternity, a lone figure appeared in the distance. It was the suspect. He had taken the bait and fallen right into the police trap. The police moved in quickly, surprising the suspect and taking him into custody without any further struggle. The arrest was made and the suspect was brought back to the station for questioning. With the killer in custody, the police were eager to get answers. They had so many questions, and the suspect was the only one who could provide the answers they needed. The police began to question the suspect, hoping to piece together what had happened the night of the murder. The suspect finally began to talk. He confessed to killing James in a fit of rage after an argument over money, explained that he had been drinking heavily and had lost control. He was remorseful, but also unapologetic about his actions. The police were shocked. They had been searching for the killer for so long, and now they had the answers they needed. The case was closed, and justice had been served, or so they thought. As the trial began, it became apparent that the killer had a history of violence and mental illness. His defense attorney argued that he should not be held fully accountable for his actions due to his state of mind. The prosecution, however, argued that this was no excuse for murder and demanded justice for the victim. As the trial progressed, more details emerged. It was revealed that the victim had been a friend of the killer, and that they had been arguing over money for some time. The killer had been drinking heavily and had snapped, leading to the tragic outcome. The jury was left to decide the killer's fate. Would they find him guilty, or would they buy his story about being insane? The jury deliberated for several days before reaching a verdict. When they finally returned to the courtroom, they delivered their decision. The killer was found guilty of murder in the first degree. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The family of the victim was relieved that justice had been served, but they could never bring their loved one back. The case was a tragic reminder of the dangers of violence and substance abuse. The killer's mental illness had played a significant role in the crime, but it was no excuse for his actions. Ultimately, justice had been served, but the scars of the crime would forever remain. While on patrol, the cops received a frantic call from a resident who claimed that someone was trying to break into their house. The officers raced to the scene, sirens blaring, ready to confront the intruder. But what they found inside the house was beyond their wildest imaginations. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more updates.